Captain Eli Mercer strode across the sun-bleached tarmac at Grissom Air Reserve Base helmet under one-arm checklist in the other. His flight suit hugged every step with disciplined creases. At 28, he was one of the youngest pilots ever cleared to perform the A-10 Thunderbolt II's combat demo solo. Every camera was on him. People leaned over barricades. Kids waved plastic models. Veterans saluted, watching the next generation carry the legacy. Eli didn't wave back. He never did before takeoff. His father had taught him that flying meant silence first. He was 20 feet from the cockpit ladder when the base PA crackled unexpectedly to life. "Security to Line 3, we've got a lost civilian near engine prep, names Beckett Thomas. Repeat, Beckett Thomas, last seen moving near sector lights." Eli stopped, mid-step. His boots landed unevenly, the sound of jet engines dulling in his ears. For a moment the sun seemed to dim, or maybe it was just his breath catching. He turned slowly. "What? Did they just say?" he whispered. His crew chief jogged toward him, oblivious. "Captain, you good bird's green, she's just waiting on you." Eli didn't answer. He was staring across the tarmac, eyes scanning, because the name wasn't just a name. Beckett Thomas. That name had only ever been said in one context, the legend. The man his father once told him about in a shaking voice after 3 beers and 1 near-death mission. The one who flew a maintenance shuttle into Sector 7. The one no one dared follow. The one who brought back a pilot with a snapped wing and half an engine by rerouting fuel lines mid-air because he refused to let gravity make the final decision. He wasn't even supposed to be there, his father once whispered. But he was. And that's the only reason I'm here. And now, that name had just been announced, like it was a misfiled, lost and found claim. Eli turned to his crew chief, voice dry. "Say again, where did they find that man?" "I think he got caught wandering too close to the engine line. You know how it is. Airshows, someone's grandpa always gets too curious." But Eli was already moving. Not toward the ladder, but away from the plane, toward the name, toward the man. And somewhere beyond the bleachers, beyond the merch booths, and the popcorn carts, and the crowd that hadn't noticed anything yet, a quiet figure in a faded blue jacket stood near the wrong part of the field, holding something old in his hand. A notebook, a patch, and a past no one here remembered, except one. 15 minutes earlier, the gates had just opened. Crowds surged in like a wave stroller pushing parents, patch-covered veterans, teenagers holding energy drinks, and smartphones on selfie sticks. Jet engines whined in the distance, A-10s stretching their wings with mechanical yawns. And walking slowly behind them all, like a man swimming upstream in a river he once dug himself, was Thomas Beckett. 74, boots scuffed from 100 hangar floors. Windbreaker sun-faded at the shoulders. On his shoulder, a leather satchel that looked like it had been dragged through 3 wars, and probably had. He didn't look lost. He looked precise, focused, but no one saw that. To everyone else, he was just another old guy wandering through the crowd, like he forgot where he parked. He stepped off the main path past a row of static aircraft displays and walked toward a red rope that separated the public from the ground crew area. On the other side, young mechanics in Navy jumpsuits were wheeling out hydraulic test rigs and stacking metal sheets for the maintenance demo scheduled that afternoon. Beckett stopped 6 feet from the rope. He leaned slightly forward. He wasn't here for the air show. He was here to watch the crew, the tools, the choices. He wanted to see the patch they'd use on the left wing mock panel, because if they were following the original Beckett pattern, they'd angle the tape at 30 degrees. And if they weren't, they'd be wasting their time. He reached into his bag, fingers brushing past brittle paper and the curved edge of an aluminum stencil. He found the page he wanted, Schematic 11B Single Rip Underfire Protocol, and unfolded it like a prayer. Then came the voice. "Sir, this area's restricted." Beckett looked up. A security staffer in a black polo stood in front of him, arms crossed, sunglasses reflective. 25? Maybe. "I understand," Beckett said calmly. I'm not trying to cross. Just wanted a closer look at the patch setup. Sir, we've had issues before. VIPs only pass this line. Could you please step back? Another staffer jogged up, clipboard in hand. What's going on? This gentleman here's a little too close to the ops zone, the first replied. Then, not bothering to lower his voice. Probably somebody's grandpa thought he was part of the tour. They both chuckled. Beckett didn't. He simply nodded, folded the schematic slowly, precisely, and slipped it back into the satchel. He stepped back 3 paces past the rope and stood quietly. He'd been laughed at before. In 1974, when he'd proposed field repairs using soda cans and bismuth solder, they'd called him insane. In 1981, when he patched a hydraulic line with heat wrap and fishing wire under sniper fire in Panama, they called him desperate. In 1990, when his methods saved 3 A-10s during Desert Storm, they called him lucky. They never called him what he was. But that was fine. He didn't need names. He needed results. 10 minutes later, he was by the main fence line surrounded by people who didn't know he existed. A toddler screamed about cotton candy. A dad snapped photos of an F-16 static model. A teenage girl live-streamed the sky yelling, "Here comes the warthog." Beckett opened the satchel again. This time he didn't look around. He just turned to page 17, Patch Theory Live Fire Scenarios, and traced the ink lines with his finger. The page smelled like engine oil and time. It was written in block letters smudged at the edges. Field tested over 20 years. He had carried this notebook through every war zone since '75. It had never failed him. It had never failed the aircraft. It had saved lives. But to most here, he was a slow-moving, confused old man with a weird bag. That's when someone finally noticed. A soft voice. "Is that what I think it is?" Beckett looked up. A woman in a Flightline jumpsuit, maybe 23, stood just behind him. She pointed at the diagram. "That's the triple-layer seal patch with side torque reinforcement. I haven't seen that in print since basic training." Beckett smiled slightly. "It works." She stepped closer. "Where did you get this?" "I wrote it." Pause. Blink. "What's your name, sir?" And before he could answer, before she could react, the PA system crackled across the base. "Security to line 3. We've got a lost civilian near engine prep, names Beckett Thomas." Captain Eli Mercer stood halfway up the ladder to his A-10, helmet in hand, heart somewhere in his throat. The name still echoed inside his head, like an afterburner refusing to fade. Beckett Thomas. The crew chief below him tilted his head. "Sir, we good." Eli blinked, eyes refocusing. His boot was still on the 3rd rung. His fingers clenched around the ladder's cold rail. "Did they confirm that name?" he asked quietly. The chief frowned. I guess lost civilian near line 3. Why? Eli climbed down. He wasn't sure why yet, but everything in his gut told him something was about to break open. Something that had no place in a routine airshow schedule and everything to do with why he ever wore this suit. He jogged across the tarmac, past a row of maintenance bays, past the rows of snack stands and souvenir tents. And just as he rounded the corner into Sector C, the crowd began to shift. People were looking at something. No, at someone. Phones were out. Voices were murmuring. And at the center of it, all standing exactly where security had pushed him back minutes earlier, was a man in a faded jacket, holding a notebook. Next to him stood a young female mechanic, eyes wide, mouth moving quickly as she pointed to the page he had just shown her. The moment Eli saw the sketch, the jagged panel cut the aluminum overlay, the handwritten torque callouts, he stopped walking. He knew that page. He'd seen it in a training video when he was 17, playing on a dusty old screen in his father's garage. He'd paused the frame, asked his dad who the man was in the background scribbling instructions on a wing. His father had whispered, "That man saved my life before I ever flew." Eli stepped forward slowly. The mechanic looked up. "Sir, do you know who this is?" Beckett didn't look up yet. He was still turning the page. To another patch, another memory, Another aircraft someone had once called unfixable until he fixed it. 10 feet away, someone tapped into the base comms channel. Captain Mercer's off pattern. Repeat, he's not in pre-flight. Tower requests update. Sir Eli said, voice barely above a breath. May I see the cover of your manual? Beckett handed it to him without a word. Eli turned it over. Saw the name stamped at the top. Not typed, stamped. T. Beckett. Aditen BDR Prototype Protocol. V1.0. Do not duplicate. His hands trembled. Not from nerves, but from reverence. You flew Sector 7, Eli said. Didn't you? That made the old man pause. His gaze lifted. Eyes steady. You weren't supposed to know about that. I do, Eli whispered. My father served in the ops wing when the shuttle came back. The one patched in midair. Wasn't a shuttle, Beckett said softly. It was a bird missing half its soul. Silence fell around them. The crowd had gathered now, mechanics, pilots, families, civilians, dozens, then hundreds. The word had spread. And Eli Mercer, decorated pilot scheduled performer Air Force Rising Star, took a slow step backward. Then another. Then he did something no one expected. He saluted, full military posture, to a man not in uniform, to a man holding duct tape notes, to a man who had never received a medal for what he survived. The crowd froze. Then someone else saluted, a crew chief, then a young cadet, then a veteran in a wheelchair, and slowly, silently, Sector C turned into a field of upright palms. Inside the control tower, someone leaned over to the base commander. Sir, should we cancel the demo flight? The commander stared at the monitor, watched the ripple unfold, then said, No, we're not canceling it. Pause. We're changing the name. Outside, Eli finally spoke again. My flight crew's still waiting for me, but there's something else I need to do first. He tapped his earpiece, flipping the comm to tower. This is Captain Mercer. Requesting clearance to break pattern. Say again, Captain. I need to make a pass over Sector C for personal recognition. Silence. Then, Captain, do what you need to do. Eli turned back to Beckett. Sir, I'd like to honor you properly, if you'll allow me. Beckett's response was simple. Fly low. The A-10's engines roared awake, but this wasn't part of the script. People along the runway leaned forward, shielding their eyes from the afternoon glare. The announcer's voice faltered mid-sentence, replaced by static, then silence. A low murmur spread across the crowd as Captain Eli Mercer's Warthog call sign, Vindicator 1, taxied away from its original demo path and angled toward Sector C. Inside the cockpit, Eli tapped the comms to base-wide frequency. His voice came through every loudspeaker on the field. Calm, slow, unshakable. This is Captain Eli Mercer, pilot of the A-10 Thunderbolt II. I was scheduled to perform a combat demo today. But before that happens, I have something to say. The crowd fell dead quiet. Even the snack carts stopped. There's a man standing in Sector C. He's not wearing a uniform. He's not on the schedule. But without him, I wouldn't be flying today. Without him, half of what we know about emergency survival in the air wouldn't exist. Beckett stood motionless at the edge of the tarmac, the sun casting a sharp shadow behind him. Eli's voice continued. His name is Chief Engineer Thomas Beckett. 40 years ago in a theater we still pretend didn't exist. He kept a crippled jet airborne longer than God intended. He redefined what repair means in combat, and just now he was almost removed from this airfield, labeled a lost civilian, forgotten. A ripple ran through the crowd. Heads turned. Some gasped. So before I fly, I'm going to do what the manual says you should always do. Acknowledge what saved you. The A-10 lifted off, but not in a loop, not in a stunt. It stayed low 30 feet off the deck, screaming over Sector C at thunderclap speed. People screamed not in fear but in awe. As it passed above Beckett, the jet dipped once, then again, then leveled a modified salute reserved only for combat honor passovers. The wind from the flyby kicked up dust and flags. Hats flew. A baby cried. 100 hands rose to shield eyes. Then the crowd erupted. Veterans stood. Tech crews saluted. Mechanics dropped tools and clapped with grease-stained palms. And near the front, the same young mechanic who had seen the notebook first had tears pouring down her face. "That's him," she whispered. "He's the guy in the stories." Back at ground control, someone turned to the base commander. "You want to authorize a citation commendation?" The commander stared at the sky. "No. I want everyone here to remember this wasn't planned. That makes it real." The announcer finally returned to the mic, his voice trembling. "Ladies and gentlemen, we just witnessed an unscheduled pass by Captain Mercer in recognition of Chief Engineer Beckett. We will now resume with the rest of the show shortly." But no one moved. The show didn't resume. Not yet, because for the first time, the crowd had stopped looking up at the aircraft and started looking down at the man who had once been told he didn't belong. Beckett didn't smile, didn't wave. He simply closed his notebook, rebuckled the leather strap, and stood quietly as the warthog climbed high into the sun, held together by 1,000 tiny miracles no one ever celebrated until now. The moment the warthog disappeared into the sky, something subtle but irreversible shifted across Grissom Air Reserve Base. The air changed. People didn't return to their popcorn or fold-up chairs. They stayed near Sector C, eyes fixed on the man still standing with his satchel. It wasn't just curiosity anymore. It was reverence, but an unfamiliar, tentative kind. The kind people offer when they realize they might have witnessed something sacred without even understanding it. Then, from the far end of the flight line, a convoy of base leadership moved fast. A general in pressed blues, flanked by aides and crew chiefs, crossed the tarmac like a man on a mission. His shoes snapped with precision, but his expression was something else, closer to apology than protocol. He stopped 5 feet from Beckett and snapped a sharp salute. "Chief Engineer Beckett," he said, "on behalf of the United States Air Force, this base, and every aircraft you've ever kept in the air, I'd like to offer our deepest apology and our full recognition." Beckett looked up, and for a beat he said nothing. Then he returned the salute slower, but no less sharp. "I'm not here for apologies, General," he said. "I'm here for the patchwork." The general's brow lifted just slightly. "We're about to run the emergency maintenance demo on the ground unit. Would you consider leading it?" Beckett raised an eyebrow. "Depends on if you've got a wrench." 10 minutes later, the barricades around the demo zone were gone. VIPs stepped aside. Security held the line not to keep people out, but to keep the crowd from flooding in. In the center of the space stood a partial A-10 airframe, its left wing prepped with a mock hydraulic rupture. 3 young mechanics stood beside it, nervous. The lead crew chief stepped forward. "Sir, we've got the layout prepped according to BDAR version 3.4. We use the torque clamp protocol." Beckett stepped beside him, pulled off his windbreaker, and handed the satchel to Martinez, the young mechanic who'd first recognized him. "You ever lay sealant in a monsoon with no gloves?" he asked the crew chief. No, sir." "Then forget the manual for 5 minutes." He rolled up his sleeves, took the torque wrench, and the entire crowd leaned in. It wasn't flashy. There were no fireworks, no music, just the sound of steel meeting steel, of commands given with short, quiet clarity. "Clamp here. Angle's wrong. Try 35, not 45. Feel the tension with your palm, not your eyes." The young mechanics followed every word like gospel. They didn't nod. They absorbed, because what Beckett was giving them wasn't just instruction, it was lived precision. Hard-won muscle memory passed down the only way it ever sticks from hand to hand, in the act of doing. Behind the rope line, Eli Mercer returned, helmet off, face flushed from the descent. He stood quietly beside Martinez, watching his grandfather work, not as a guest, not as a relic, but as one of them. "He hasn't lost it," Eli murmured. Martinez didn't take her eyes off Beckett. He never had a chance to. At one point, Beckett paused mid-bolt. He turned to the youngest tech, a girl barely 20, eyes wide, wrench trembling. "You do this part," he said. She blinked. "Sir." "Set the bolt. Feel the tension." She knelt beside him, hands shaking, eyes darting to the pressure gauge. Beckett guided her fingers. Not with commands, but with a whisper. Don't force it. Let the material tell you when it's right. She torqued the bolt slowly. The gauge ticked. Green. Good, Beckett said. Why, she asked. Because if it feels done and sounds done, it probably is done. Now check it again anyway. That's what saves people. She smiled, just a little, and tightened it again. By the time they sealed the rupture and completed the pressure test, the crowd was dead silent. Then the light turned green, and 5,000 people exploded into applause. But Beckett didn't look up. He was too busy wiping sealant off his palms with a rag that smelled like old hangers and better days. After the demo, the general approached him again. I've spoken with Washington, he said. There's going to be an initiative. They want to train new field engineers using your methods. They're calling it the Beckett model. Beckett raised an eyebrow. I've never liked my name on things. They're not asking for a signature, just a legacy. Beckett looked back at the demo rig, at the young hands now putting away the tools with reverence instead of routine. Then he nodded. You want to teach them right, he said. Yes, sir. Then make sure they start here. He tapped his temple. Not here. He tapped the checklist. Later that evening, Beckett sat on an upturned supply crate, elbows on knees, watching the stars blink awake above the runway. Eli joined him. You know, you stopped an entire air show, right? I didn't do anything. Eli smirked. That's the scariest part. They sat in silence. Then Beckett said almost to himself, I spent 40 years thinking the best work was the work no one saw. And now, Beckett shrugged. Now I think the best work is the kind that outlives you. The next morning, the hangar was quiet. Too quiet. After the chaos of the air show, after the honors and the salutes, after the impromptu workshop that drew 100 grease-streaked minds, the space now felt hollow. Not empty, just waiting. Beckett stood near the back, sorting through a box of salvaged parts. He moved with the same deliberate pace he always had, but slower now, not from age, but from the weight of memory. He was alone, until he wasn't. The footsteps came soft. No boots, civilian shoes. He didn't look up. Not at first. He just said, I thought I'd bought myself a day off. Then a voice answered. Not sharp, not apologetic, but quiet. Humbled. I didn't come to ask anything. Just to say I saw it. All of it. Beckett turned. It was Brent, the young staffer who had dismissed him outside the VIP zone. The one who'd laughed. The one who'd called him somebody's grandpa. Now he looked like someone who'd been up all night. No badge. No clipboard. Just a man who knew he was standing in the place where his assumptions had died. Beckett didn't speak. Brent stepped forward, pulling something from his coat. It was a printout. A PDF. Highlighted. Annotated. I spent all night reading the manual, Brent said. The original. The real one. I had to pull it from a vet's archive. Found notes from Iraq. Bosnia. One that just said, saved my ass again, thanks, old man. Beckett watched him. Still no words. I don't expect you to forgive me, Brent continued. But if you'll let me, I'd like to learn. He paused, then held up a spiral notebook. It was clean, unused. I want to earn my first grease stain. Beckett stepped forward, took the notebook. He held it, then handed it back. You'll earn it, he said, but not in here. Brent blinked. Sir, Beckett pointed to the far hangar doors. To learn, you've got to be where the problem is. Outside, the sun had risen into a soft, honest sky, and as Brent followed the old man toward a stack of half-dismantled equipment crates, something shifted again. This wasn't punishment. It wasn't a redemption arc. It was a second chance offered not with a speech, but with silence and a shared wrench. Washington didn't look like it remembered how to bleed. The Defense Subcommittee on Readiness and Maintenance had a long, polished table. Each seat came with a nameplate, a crystal water glass, and 100 years of reasons not to listen. But today, they were listening, because someone had made a call. And now Thomas Beckett sat at that table. He wasn't in a uniform. He didn't bring lawyers or a PowerPoint. Just a coffee-stained notebook, a pressure gauge he'd brought from the field, and a steel washer he kept in his pocket for luck. The committee chair, a man in tailored gray with flag pins on both lapels, cleared his throat. "Mr. Beckett, your work has been cited in over a dozen readiness briefings. Quietly, internally. Yet you've never testified publicly. Why now?" Beckett didn't flinch. "I didn't come to be recognized," he said. "I came to warn you." That made a few pens stop moving. "I've walked your aircraft yards. I've seen hangars where maintainers are handed laptops before they're handed wrenches. I've seen young techs taught how to fill out reports before they're taught how to listen to metal strain under stress." He paused. "Meanwhile, the people who knew how to fix things, the ones who survived because they had to improvise under fire, were left behind, or retired out, or buried in forgotten memos." One senator leaned forward. "Sir, are you suggesting current doctrine is flawed?" "I'm suggesting it's half a doctrine," Beckett replied. "You've got procedures, but no memory, technology, but no instinct." He reached into his satchel and pulled out a folded page, grease-streaked, burned at the edge. "This was the first field patch I ever wrote. Sector 7. The page nearly melted when the portable generator caught fire. He placed it gently on the table. "And that patch still used in Syria last year. Still saving aircraft. Because no one improved it. Because no one bothered to listen to the men and women who knew why it worked." Another pause. Longer. He looked across the room, not with anger, but with cold, unshakable certainty. "You want better readiness. Start by honoring the silence. Start by training your crews not just in compliance, but in courage." The room held its breath. No applause, no flashbulbs, just a man speaking the truth with hands that still smelled faintly of fuel. And somewhere in the back row, Martinez sat in uniform, watching the man who taught her to patch a broken wing without waiting for permission. Finally patch a system no one thought could be fixed. The hangar doors slid open with their usual grind, but this time Thomas Beckett wasn't the first one in. Martinez stood at the center of the Beckett Field Hub, organizing students into teams for the next drill, a cross-service patch simulation, involving nothing but hand tools and emergency-grade sheet metal. Beckett stepped in quietly, nodded at her with a proud glance, and made his way toward the back bench. Same table, same pressure gauge, same notebook now wrapped in a soft cloth. And then he heard the voice. Soft, measured, but unmistakably sharp underneath. Still using 3-core-8 torque specs for 400-level actuator plates. "Thought you would have upgraded by now." Beckett froze, turned, and there she stood, silver hair and a tight bun. Civilian jacket oil-stained at the cuffs. A clipboard in one hand, a flight tag keychain in the other. "Lillian," he breathed. Lillian Rourke, co-creator of the early field diagrams. The woman who refused promotions if it meant losing time with the tools. The only person who challenged Beckett in margin notes, and the last one to ever outwork him in a sandstorm. "I got your call," she said. "Late as usual." He chuckled. "Wasn't sure you'd come." She stepped closer, holding up a flash drive. "You're not the only one who kept receipts. I've got 40 years of unofficial fixes you, and I never published. Thought we could use a bigger chalkboard." Beckett nodded slowly. A grin spread across his face like sunlight over rusted steel. "Then let's build it right this time." From the far end of the hangar, Martinez watched them lean over the workbench together. Rourke snapping into rhythm like no years had passed. Two ghosts no longer haunting, now building, again, together. 6 months later, the lecture hall at the Air Force Academy buzzed with murmurs. Cadets in polished uniforms filed in notebooks ready, some still whispering about who the guest speaker was. The screen at the front was blank. No title, no credentials, just a small note on the digital itinerary. Patch Theory 1A, guest lecture. Then the door opened. No ceremony, just Beckett. No medals, just his old notebook, the corner-taped edges curled from time. He stepped to the front. Didn't clear his throat. Didn't give his name. He just lifted the notebook. "I wrote this 39 years ago." Silence. Then he tapped it once. "Still works." Someone chuckled nervously. He nodded toward a cadet in the second row. "You ever torque a bolt with gloves on?" The cadet blinked. "No, sir." Beckett stepped closer, held out a small metal bolt. "Do it. Right now." The cadet hesitated, then stood, took the bolt, put on his issued gloves, and fumbled the tool. Click. "Too soon." Beckett raised an eyebrow. "You trust that?" "No, sir." "Why not?" "Because I didn't feel it." Beckett smiled, the smallest lift of a man who had seen enough failures to know the value of doubt. That, he said, is the entire point of this lecture. He didn't say more. He didn't need to. He just left the bolt on the table and walked out. 10 minutes later, the cadets were dismissed. But one of them, a young woman with a smear of graphite on her cheek, stayed behind. She walked to the front, picked up the bolt, held it in her palm, then quietly pulled off one glove, gripped the wrench, turned slowly. Click. This time she felt it. She didn't smile. She just whispered to no one, "Still works."